The hospital called to say my son died in surgery this morning. He's been dead for 3 years. The voice on the phone was professional, practiced in delivering devastating news. Mr. Novak, this is Dr. Prasad from St. Joseph's Medical Center. I'm calling about your son, Lucas Novak. I'm so sorry to inform you that he passed away during emergency surgery at 8:47 this morning. We need you to come to the hospital immediately. I was standing in my garage, wrench in hand, working on the motorcycle I'd bought after Lucas died. My way of feeling close to him since he'd loved bikes. The wrench clattered onto the concrete floor, the sound echoing in the empty space. My hands started shaking so badly I had to grab the workbench to stay upright. Lucas had died 3 years ago. I'd identified his body myself after the car accident. His face so damaged I'd recognized him only by the compass tattoo on his wrist, the one we'd gotten together on his 18th birthday. I'd carried his casket as a pallbearer, feeling the weight of my failure as a father with every step toward the grave. There must be some mistake, I managed to say, my voice coming out hoarse. My son Lucas died in 2021. Car accident on Route 66. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if I was having some kind of breakdown, if grief had finally broken something in my mind. Dr. Prasad cleared his throat. Sir, I'm looking at his chart right now. Lucas Novak, age 19, blood type O negative, birthmark on his left shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. He was brought in last night after a motorcycle accident. His emergency contact was listed as Michael Novak, this number, the birthmark. Nobody knew about that birthmark except family. Lucas used to joke it was his lucky charm, even though it hadn't brought him much luck in the end. My legs gave out, and I sat hard on the garage floor, oil stains and dirt beneath me, trying to process the impossible. That can't be. I buried my son. I have his death certificate. I visit his grave every Sunday. Dr. Prasad's voice softened, but there was something else there. Confusion. Maybe suspicion. Mr. Novak, I understand this must be extremely confusing. Would you be able to come to the hospital? We need someone to make arrangements. And there are questions about identity that need to be resolved. My mind was fracturing, trying to reconcile what I knew with what I was hearing. Lucas was dead. Had been for 3 years. I'd spent those years drowning in guilt about our last fight, about the words I'd said in anger, about how I'd failed him as a father. But this doctor was describing details only I would know, speaking about my son in the present tense, or at least the recent past. I drove to St. Joseph's in a haze, my truck on autopilot while my mind spiraled. The rational part of me knew this had to be some kind of mistake or cruel coincidence. But the father in me, the part that had never truly accepted Lucas's death, was screaming with impossible hope. The hospital smelled like every hospital, that mixture of antiseptic and human misery that had haunted me since Lucas's first death. Dr. Prasad met me at the information desk, a tall man with kind eyes that widened noticeably when he saw me. Later, I'd understand why. I looked exactly like an older version of the young man who died in his operating room. He led me through corridors that felt like a descent into madness, each step taking me closer to either shattering disappointment or impossible truth. Before we go in, he said, stopping outside a door marked Family Consultation Room, I need to prepare you. The young man who died this morning had significant facial injuries from the accident. Visual identification may be difficult. We're running DNA tests, but those take time. Can you tell me about any other identifying marks your son had? I listed them mechanically, each detail a knife twisting in old wounds. The scar on his right knee from when I'd tried teaching him to skateboard. The tattoo we'd gotten together. Matching compasses because I'd told him that fathers and sons always need to find their way back to each other. The way his left pinky finger bent slightly inward from when we'd played catch and I'd thrown too hard. Dr. Prasad took notes, his expression growing more troubled with each detail I provided. Mr. Novak, all of those markers are present on our patient, but you said your son died 3 years ago. Do you have documentation of that death? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, showing him the photos I looked at every night before sleep, the death certificate, the funeral program, the news article about the accident that had killed Lucas and 2 others when a drunk driver ran a red light. Dr. Prasad studied each image carefully, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I think you need to see him, he said quietly, but I should warn you, what you're about to experience will be extremely distressing, regardless of what the truth turns out to be. The walk to the morgue felt like reliving the worst day of my life. The same institutional coldness, the same sympathetic looks from staff, the same feeling that reality had become negotiable. But this time, there was something else. A wild, desperate hope I couldn't suppress. The body on the table was covered with a sheet up to the shoulders. The face was indeed badly damaged, swollen and distorted from impact trauma. But the hair was exactly right. That dark brown with the stubborn cowlick I used to try to tame when he was little. The build was right, lean and strong like mine had been at that age. Dr. Prasad pulled back the sheet enough to show the left wrist. There was the compass tattoo, the needle pointing north, exactly matching the one on my own wrist. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the table's edge. That's his tattoo, I whispered. But it can't be him. I buried him. I was there. The doctor revealed more. The shoulder blade with its crescent moon birthmark. The knee with its familiar scar, the crooked pinky finger. Every marker of my son's body present on this corpse that couldn't be him because he was already dead, had been dead for 36 months, was buried in Lot 457 at Riverside Cemetery, where I went every Sunday to apologize for being the kind of father who drove him away. We need to run DNA tests, Dr. Prasad said gently, to confirm identity definitively. But Mr. Novak, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain the body you buried 3 years ago was your son? The question felt like an accusation. Of course I was certain, wasn't I? The memory of that identification felt suddenly hazy. His face had been so damaged. The funeral director, Franklin Morse, had been so understanding, had handled everything when I'd been too destroyed to function. He'd recommended a closed casket, said it would be better to remember Lucas as he'd lived. I need to make some calls, I said, pulling out my phone. Called Riverside Cemetery first, asked to speak to the director, explained in halting words that there might have been a mistake, that I needed to verify my son's burial. The director's response chilled me to my core. Mr. Novak, I'm looking at our records now. Lot 457 was purchased by you 3 years ago, but there's no interment recorded. According to our files, that plot is empty. I dropped the phone. Dr. Prasad picked it up, continued the conversation while I stood frozen. When he hung up, his face was grim. They're checking their physical records and surveillance footage from 3 years ago, but their digital system shows no burial in your son's plot. My mind couldn't process this impossibility. I'd been visiting an empty grave for 3 years, talking to nothing every Sunday, pouring out my guilt and grief to dirt that didn't hold my son. And if Lucas hadn't been in that grave, where had he been? Who was this boy on the table who bore all his marks but had died this morning in a motorcycle accident my son couldn't have been in because he was supposed to be dead? Dr. Prasad made more calls while I sat in that consultation room staring at nothing. Hospital records were pulled, police contacted, databases searched. An hour later, he returned with a laptop and a deeply troubled expression. Mr. Novak, we've found some irregularities. The funeral home that handled your son's arrangements 3 years ago, Eternal Rest Mortuary, closed 6 months after your son's supposed burial. The owner, Franklin Morse, disappeared around the same time. There were questions about financial irregularities, but no criminal investigation because no families had filed complaints. He turned the laptop toward me, showing a news article I'd never seen. 3 other families have since discovered discrepancies with burials Morse handled. Empty graves, missing remains. The FBI opened an investigation last year, but without Morse, they've had limited success determining what happened to the bodies. The room spun. You're saying the funeral director stole my son's body? That I've been mourning at an empty grave while my son was... Where? How is any of this possible? Dr. Prasad pulled up another file. That's where this gets more complicated. The young man who died this morning was admitted with identification showing the name Lucas Novak. The address on his ID is an apartment complex on the south side of the city. According to the landlord we contacted, he's been living there for 2 years. Has a job at a motorcycle repair shop. Friends who've known him since he moved to the area. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Mr. Novak? Is it possible your son survived that accident 3 years ago? That someone falsified his death for some reason? The suggestion was insane, but no more insane than anything else. The police said he died on impact. 3 people died in that crash. There were witnesses. More typing. More files pulled up. Dr. Prasad's frown deepened. I'm looking at the accident report from 3 years ago. 3 victims, all identified at the scene. But, he turned the screen toward me again. The medical examiner who signed off on the identifications was Dr. Harold Sykes. He lost his license 18 months ago for falsifying autopsy reports in exchange for bribes. He's currently serving a 10-year sentence. The pieces were forming a picture too terrible to comprehend. Corrupt medical examiner, corrupt funeral director, my son's empty grave, and now a body that bore all his marks but belonged to someone who'd been living a completely different life for 2 years. We need to contact the FBI, Dr. Prasad said. This appears to be part of something much larger than a single case of mistaken identity. The FBI arrived within 2 hours. Special Agent Diana Ramirez and her partner Agent James Liu set up in a conference room. They'd been investigating Franklin Morse for 2 years, they explained. He wasn't just stealing bodies, he was selling identities. The scheme was sophisticated, Agent Ramirez explained, pulling up a complex diagram on her tablet. Morse would identify accident victims with minimal family connections. He'd falsify death certificates, arrange fake burials, then sell the victim's identity to people who needed to disappear. New social security numbers, clean backgrounds, perfect documentation, because the original person was officially dead. She showed me photos of other victims, other families who'd discovered their loved ones' graves were empty. But here's where your case is different. The others were clear-cut identity theft. The bodies were disposed of, and criminals took over their identities. But this young man, she gestured toward the morgue, he has physical markers that match your son exactly. That's not possible with simple identity theft. Agent Liu pulled up medical records from St. Joseph's. The patient admitted last night had extensive scarring consistent with major trauma from approximately 3 years ago. Surgical scars indicating multiple operations, the kind of injuries someone might sustain in a near-fatal car accident. He looked at me directly. Mr. Novak, What if your son didn't die in that crash? What if he was in a coma and someone made a deal with Morse to declare him dead? The possibility hit me like a physical blow. Lucas in a coma while I planned his funeral. Lucas recovering while I mourned at an empty grave. Lucas rebuilding his life somewhere else while I drank myself to sleep every night. But why? I asked, voice breaking. Why would Lucas not contact me if he survived? We had our problems, but he was still my son. The agents exchanged glances. That's what we need to determine, Ramirez said. The apartment where this man lived is being searched now. His employer is being interviewed. We need to understand who he thought he was for the last 2 years. The knock on the conference room door was urgent. A younger agent entered, tablet in hand, face excited with discovery. We found something at the apartment. You need to see this. He connected his tablet to the room's display screen. The image that appeared stole my breath. It was a photo wall, dozens of pictures carefully arranged. Pictures of me, recent ones, taken from a distance. Me at work, me at the cemetery, me at the bar I'd started frequenting after Lucas died, me at the gym where I'd tried to exhaust myself into not thinking about him. Someone had been watching me, documenting my life while I mourned theirs. There's more, the young agent said, swiping to the next image. A journal, pages photographed for evidence. The handwriting looked like Lucas's, but the words were impossible. Day 847, saw Dad at the cemetery again. He brought fresh flowers, told Mom's grave about me again, like she could pass messages. Wanted to approach him, but the handlers wouldn't allow it. They say it's for his safety, for everyone's safety. The program only works if everyone believes I'm dead. My ex-wife Rachel had died of cancer when Lucas was 15. It had destroyed us both, led to the drinking and anger that pushed us apart. The fact that someone knew I talked to her grave about Lucas, that meant they'd been close enough to hear. Agent Ramirez leaned forward. Handlers. Program. This sounds like witness protection, but we have no record of Lucas Novak in any federal database. She pulled out her phone, started making calls. While she worked, I read more journal entries, each one shattering my heart. Day 902. Dad joined another AA meeting. 90 days sober this time. He talked about me, about the guilt. He doesn't know I had to disappear to protect him. He doesn't know what I witnessed. My hands shook. I'd gotten sober 6 times in 3 years, fallen off the wagon each time on the anniversary of Lucas's death, but someone had been watching, documenting my struggle. Day 1001. Dad got a promotion at work. He's rebuilding. I wish I could tell him I'm proud of him. Wish I could tell him it wasn't his fault. The fight we had before the accident, I'd already forgiven him. But forgiveness doesn't matter if the program owns you. Agent Liu was running facial recognition on security footage from the motorcycle shop. Got him, he said, projecting the footage. It was grainy, but clear enough. A young man working on bikes, laughing with colleagues, living a life. The facial structure matched Lucas, despite the accident damage. But what caught my attention was the man who appeared in frame occasionally. Older, always watching, always positioned between Lucas and the exit. A handler. I've seen him, I said suddenly. The memory crystallized. At the cemetery. He's there sometimes when I visit. I thought he was mourning someone too. Agent Ramirez pulled up cemetery security footage, cross-referencing dates. There he was, the same man, keeping watch while I knelt at an empty grave. The younger agent's tablet chimed. Hidden panel in the bedroom closet, recording devices, hours of audio. He played a sample. My voice, talking to the granite headstone, telling Lucas about getting sober, about failing, about wishing I'd been a better father, all recorded. He was listening, I said, feeling sick. Every confession, every apology, he heard it all. But why? What program required a son to fake his death, to surveil his grieving father, to live 2 miles away under the same name but never make contact? Agent Ramirez's phone rang. She listened, her expression darkening. When she hung up, she looked at me with something like fear. Mr. Novak, we need to ask you about your past, specifically about your work before Lucas was born. You were military, correct? I nodded slowly. Navy. 15 years. Got out when Rachel got pregnant. Why? Agent Liu was typing rapidly. Michael Novak, Naval Intelligence, 1988 to 2003. Specialized in... He stopped, looked up at me. Your file is almost entirely redacted. What did you do for the Navy, Mr. Novak? The room felt suddenly cold. I can't discuss that. It's classified. Even 20 years later, even with my son dead on a morgue table, the training held. But Ramirez wasn't backing down. Mr. Novak, Lucas's journal mentions witnessing something. What if he discovered something about your past? What if that's why he had to disappear? The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. I'd kept one thing from my Navy days. A single photograph in a safety deposit box. A photo from an operation that never happened, with men who were never there, in a country we never invaded. If Lucas had found that photo, if he'd researched the faces in it... Oh God, I whispered. Martinez. Agent Liu's fingers flew over his keyboard. Diego Martinez, former Navy intelligence, died in 2019. No, wait, reported dead in 2019, but he looked up sharply. His death was handled by Franklin Morse. Same funeral home, same missing body situation. My blood turned to ice. Martinez had been my partner in operations that couldn't be acknowledged. If he was alive, if Lucas had found him, Martinez knew things, I said carefully. Things that certain people wouldn't want exposed. If Lucas found him, if Martinez told him about the operations, Ramirez finished the thought, then Lucas became a liability. Someone ordered his death faked to protect those secrets. But whose secrets? Liu asked. Who has the power to orchestrate something like this? I knew, but saying it out loud would paint a target on all of us. Check the journal again, I said. Look for references to Compass. Liu scrolled through the photographed pages. Found it. Operation Compass mentioned multiple times. Says it was what his father helped plan but never executed. Says it would have changed history if it hadn't been cancelled. Operation Compass. The thing that had haunted me for 20 years. A black op that had been hours from execution when someone in Washington got cold feet. But the planning documents existed. The targets had been selected. The assets were in place. If that information got out now, in the current political climate, they didn't kill him, I said, understanding finally flooding through me. They hid him. Whoever's protecting Operation Compass couldn't kill the son of one of the planners. Too suspicious. So they faked his death, put him in their program, kept him close enough to watch, but far enough to control. Agent Ramirez stood up. We need to get you into protective custody immediately. If you're right, if this is about Operation Compass, then we're dealing with people so far above our pay grade that the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Liu drew his weapon. That's not a power failure. Someone cut the main line. Through the window, I could see black SUVs surrounding the hospital. Men in tactical gear were already entering the building. Not FBI, not local police. The kind of men who didn't exist officially, who did work that never happened, who cleaned up messes that couldn't be allowed to surface. They're here for the body, I said. They need to confirm Lucas is really dead this time, that their leverage is gone. Ramirez was on her radio, calling for backup that we all knew would arrive too late or be told to stand down. The door opened. Not kicked in, not breached, just opened with a key card that shouldn't have worked. A man entered, older now but unmistakable. Diego Martinez, my former partner, the man who was supposed to be dead. Hello, Mike, he said calmly. We need to talk about your son. Behind him stood the handler from the cemetery videos, and behind him, more men with weapons. Ramirez and Liu were frozen, unsure whether to resist or comply. Diego, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. You son of a bitch. You've been alive this whole time. You've been running this. Martinez nodded. Someone had to manage the program. Keep the secrets buried. Your son was never supposed to find that photo, Mike. You were supposed to have destroyed it years ago. So you faked his death? Made me mourn for 3 years while you used him as, what, leverage? Martinez's expression didn't change. Insurance. You know too much, Mike. We all do. But as long as Lucas was alive in the program, you'd never talk. You'd never risk him. And now he's dead, I said. Really dead this time. Your insurance is gone. Martinez glanced toward the morgue. Yes, the motorcycle accident was unfortunate. The handler was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of thing. He looked back at me. You have a choice now, Mike. Come with us. Join the program yourself, and we can make this all disappear. The FBI agents here will be reassigned, their investigation redirected. You'll be relocated, given a new life. Or, he didn't need to finish. The or was obvious. What about my son's body? I asked. I want to bury him properly this time. Martinez shook his head. The body is evidence. It needs to disappear. Officially, Lucas Novak died 3 years ago. That story doesn't change. The rage I'd been containing for 3 years, the guilt, the grief, it all crystallized into a single moment of clarity. No, I said simply. I'm done with your programs and secrets. My son is dead because of Operation Compass. The least you can do is let me bury him. Martinez sighed. Mike, be reasonable. You know how this works. You helped design the protocols. That's when I played my last card. I kept more than just a photo, Diego. I kept everything. Documents, recordings, the full Operation Compass plan. It's in a dozen safety deposit boxes under different names. If I disappear, if these agents disappear, it all goes public. It was mostly a bluff. I had some documents, but not everything. But Martinez didn't know that. His hand moved to his weapon. You wouldn't. The damage to national security. My son is dead, I roared. You killed him with your games and secrets. National security can burn for all I care. The standoff stretched taut. Federal agents, shadow operatives, and a grieving father in a hospital emergency room lit in red. Then Agent Ramirez spoke up. Mr. Martinez, or whoever you are, this is being recorded. This entire conversation is being streamed to FBI headquarters. You're admitting to conspiracy, murder, falsifying federal documents. Martinez smiled coldly. No recording equipment works when we don't want it to, Agent. But Liu held up his phone. Backup device. Different frequency. Already uploaded. It was probably a lie, but Martinez couldn't be sure. The calculation played across his face. Kill everyone and risk exposure. Or retreat and regroup. Finally, he stepped back. You're making a mistake, Mike. All of you are. Operation Compass was canceled for a reason, but the people who wanted it still exist. They won't let this surface. He turned to leave, then paused. Your son was brave, Mike. When he found out the truth, he wanted to expose everything. We convinced him that would get you killed. That's the only reason he agreed to disappear. To protect you. Then they were gone, melting back into shadows, leaving us in emergency lighting with Lucas's body one room away. Agent Ramirez immediately started making calls, real backup, real recordings, real investigations. But I knew it was mostly theater. Martinez and his people operated outside normal channels. They'd regroup, reassess, find another way to contain this. But they'd made one mistake. They'd confirmed Lucas had been alive these 3 years. That meant there were records, witnesses, evidence of the program. Other people like Lucas, living dead for someone else's secrets. I walked to the morgue, to my son's body, pulled back the sheet and really looked at him. The damage from the motorcycle accident was severe, but underneath I could see evidence of the earlier trauma. Surgical scars from the car accident 3 years ago. He'd survived that crash, gone through months of recovery, only to be trapped in someone else's game. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his corpse. "I'm sorry I had that photo. Sorry you found it. Sorry I wasn't the father you needed." But apologies to the dead are just self-comfort. What mattered now was justice for the living. Agent Liu appeared at my shoulder. "We've been digging into Martinez's statement about others in the program. If your son was hidden for 3 years, there might be more. Other victims whose deaths were faked." I nodded. Lucas's journal mentioned others, people he'd met who were supposedly dead. It was a thread that, when pulled, might unravel everything. "We'll need your help," Ramirez said, joining us. "Your knowledge of Operation Compass, of the people involved. It's the only way to expose this." I looked at Lucas one last time. My son, who died twice for secrets that should never have existed. "Yes," I said. "I'll tell you everything." The investigation that followed was Byzantine in its complexity. Every lead spawned 3 more. Every supposed death that Morse had handled became suspect. We found 17 people living in the program, all connected to Operation Compass in some way. Children of operatives, spouses who'd learned too much, siblings who'd asked the wrong questions. All officially dead, all living under surveillance, all leveraged to keep old secrets buried. Lucas's journal became the Rosetta Stone for understanding the program. His observations, his secret recordings, his maps of the network. He'd spent 3 years pretending to comply while documenting everything. The motorcycle accident that killed him was looking less accidental by the hour. Brake lines showed signs of tampering. The handler who was supposed to be watching him had disappeared. My theory was that Lucas had finally tried to escape, to contact me directly, and they'd killed him for it. Made it look accidental but sloppy enough that his body would be identified, that I'd be pulled in, that the whole program would be exposed. Maybe Lucas had planned it that way. Maybe his death was his final intelligence operation. I'd never know for sure, but it fit the son I remembered. Smart, stubborn, willing to sacrifice himself for what was right. The media got wind of the story within a week. Government conspiracy fakes deaths to hide Black Ops secrets. It sounded like conspiracy theory nonsense, which is why it was perfect. The more outlandish it seemed, the more people dismissed it, the safer the real investigation became. We worked in that shadow, building cases that would hold up in court while the public debated whether we were heroes or lunatics. Martinez tried one more approach, 3 weeks after the hospital confrontation. He appeared at Lucas's real funeral. We'd finally gotten his body released. Stood at the back like a mourner, but I knew he was there to negotiate. After the service, he approached. "This doesn't have to destroy everything, Mike. We can contain this, limit the damage." I looked at him, this man I'd once trusted with my life, who'd stolen my son's life. "The damage is already done, Diego. Lucas is dead, really dead. Your leverage is gone." He leaned in close. "You still have family? Extended family? Cousins? Nephews? Do you want them looking over their shoulders forever?" It was a threat, naked and clear, but I was past caring. If anything happens to anyone in my family, Operation Compass goes public in full. Every name, every target, every asset. I've made arrangements. It wasn't entirely true, but truth was negotiable in our world. Martinez studied me for a long moment. "You've changed, Mike. The operator I knew would have understood the necessity." I laughed, bitter and broken. "The operator you knew hadn't buried his son twice. He left after that, and I haven't seen him since. But I know he's out there, managing damage, containing leaks, protecting secrets that matter more than lives." The investigation continued for months. Congressional hearings were held behind closed doors. A few low-level operatives were sacrificed to give the appearance of accountability. The program was officially shut down, which meant it was reorganized under a different name. The 17 people we'd found living as dead were given choices: new identities and actual witness protection, or return to their old lives with cover stories. Most chose new identities. The truth was too heavy to carry back to their families, but 3 of them, brave or foolish, chose to reclaim their names. Their stories made headlines for a week before being buried under new scandals. One of them, a woman named Jennifer, whose death had been faked after she'd discovered her husband's involvement in Operation Compass, became an advocate for others in similar situations. She and I sometimes spoke at conferences about government overreach, about the cost of secrets, about the families destroyed by classification stamps. The truth about Operation Compass never fully surfaced. Too many powerful people had too much to lose. but pieces leaked out, enough to force changes, to add oversight, to make it harder for the next Operation Compass to disappear people's children. Lucas was buried for real this time, in a plot I chose myself, with a headstone that told the truth. Lucas Michael Novak, beloved son, died twice for his country's secrets. The cemetery tried to refuse the inscription, but I had lawyers now, good ones, paid for with the settlement the government quietly offered to make me go away. I didn't go away. Instead, I used their money to fund investigations into other suspicious deaths, other empty graves, other parents mourning children who might still be alive somewhere. It became my mission, my way of honoring Lucas, turning his death into something meaningful. 6 months after the real funeral, I got a package with no return address. Inside was Lucas's journal, the complete version, not just what the FBI had photographed. The final entry, dated the day before his death, read, "Tomorrow I'm going to try to escape, to see Dad, to tell him the truth. If something happens to me, if this is my last entry, know that I forgave him long ago. The secrets he kept were to protect me. The secrets I kept were to protect him. In the end, we were both prisoners of protection, both victims of love used as leverage. Tell him I loved him. Tell him the compass always pointed home." I carry that journal with me now, read from it sometimes when I speak about Lucas, about the program, about the cost of classified operations. Most people think I'm a grieving father who's constructed an elaborate conspiracy to deal with loss. That's fine. The people who need to know the truth know it. The parents whose children have disappeared into programs that don't exist, they know. They reach out, share their stories, build networks of resistance against the shadow governance that treats citizens as chess pieces. The motorcycle I'd been working on when the hospital called, I finished it. Ride it sometimes to the places Lucas mentioned in his journal. The apartment where he lived those hidden years. The shop where he worked. The hills where he'd go to think about the life he couldn't have. At each place, I find traces of him. People who remember the quiet young man who seemed sad even when smiling. Who worked hard but never talked about his past. Who had a compass tattoo that matched the older man who sometimes came to check on him. They didn't know they were seeing a dead man living, a ghost made flesh, a son sacrificed to protect secrets that should never have existed. The handler who'd watched Lucas, the one who'd disappeared after the accident, his body was found 6 months later. Suicide, the report said, though the physics of how he'd shot himself twice in the head were never adequately explained. He'd left a note admitting to tampering with Lucas's motorcycle, claiming he'd acted alone, absolving the program of responsibility. Nobody believed it, but it provided official closure. Martinez sent one last message, a year after Lucas's death, just a photo of a compass with the needle pointing to a set of coordinates. When I traced them, they led to a storage unit paid for in cash. Inside were boxes of documents about Operation Compass, about the program, about Lucas's 3 hidden years, everything Martinez couldn't let surface, but couldn't bring himself to destroy. A conscience, even in men like us, never fully dies. I burned it all. Kept copies first, of course, hidden in ways Martinez taught me years ago. But the originals needed to disappear. Their existence was too dangerous, too tempting for the wrong people. Lucas hadn't died to expose Operation Compass. He died to end it. The best way to honor that was to let the secrets die too, keeping only enough truth to prevent repetition. 3 years of mourning at an empty grave, 3 years of Lucas living in shadows, 1 moment of truth in a hospital morgue. These numbers define the shape of loss, but not its weight. That's measured in different units. In Sundays at the cemetery talking to dirt, in recordings of a son listening to his father's grief, in journal entries documenting a love that survived even forced death. Lucas's compass tattoo pointed north, toward hope and home, and the father he couldn't reach. My matching tattoo points toward him now, toward the son I failed to protect from my own past, toward the truth that killed him twice. The program that controlled Lucas supposedly ended with his death, but I know better. It just evolved, adapted, found new ways to use love as leverage. There are other Lucas Novaks out there, other living dead, other parents mourning at empty graves. I search for them, using skills Martinez and I had learned decades ago, skills meant for different purposes. Sometimes I find them. Sometimes I can prove someone's alive before they're killed for real. Sometimes I'm too late and can only offer truth to grieving families. It's not enough, but it's something. A mission. A purpose. A way to make Lucas's death mean more than just another casualty of classification. I still visit his grave every Sunday, the real one this time. Still tell him about my life, my work, my guilt. The difference is that now I know he might have heard those conversations for 3 years, might have known he was loved despite the distance forced between us. That knowledge doesn't ease the grief, but shapes it into something purposeful. Every parent I help, every fake death I expose, every program operative I identify, it's all for Lucas, all testimony that his life mattered more than the secrets that stole it. The hospital that called that morning to tell me my son had died in surgery, they had no idea what they were uncovering. They thought they were notifying next of kin about a motorcycle accident. Instead, They exposed a conspiracy that reached from hospital morgues to the highest levels of intelligence services. Dr. Prasad still works there. We've stayed in touch. He says that case changed how he practices medicine, made him question more, dig deeper, never assume identity is as simple as it seems. He's caught 2 other cases of suspicious deaths, possibly program-related. Small victories against an enormous machine, but victories nonetheless. The FBI agents, Ramirez and Liu, they got promoted. Officially for excellent work on a complex case. Actually to keep them quiet, to bring them inside where they could be monitored. They still send me information sometimes, carefully, through channels that don't officially exist. They're fighting from inside now, trying to add oversight to operations that resist observation. My ex-wife Rachel's grave sits next to Lucas's now. I had her moved so they could be together. Sometimes I imagine them reunited wherever souls go, her finally able to hold the son she'd watched grow troubled after her death. It's probably just comfort fiction, but grief needs its stories. The truth is hard enough, that Rachel died never knowing our son would disappear into shadow operations, that Lucas died never able to tell his mother he'd survived to protect his father. Their graves are marked simply, but people who know the story leave tokens. Compass roses, mostly. Small metal ones that accumulate until the groundskeepers clear them away. But they always reappear, left by parents who understand, by investigators who've followed the trail, by others who've escaped programs that don't exist. The storage unit where I keep the evidence is climate-controlled, fireproof, and paid for through the kind of financial structures Martinez taught me to create. If something happens to me, if I have an accident or suddenly decide to commit suicide, the contents release automatically to 17 different media outlets and congressional offices. It's my insurance policy, my leverage against those who use leverage. They know it exists, know I'll use it, know the damage it would cause. So we exist in detente, circling each other warily, neither able to strike without destroying ourselves. Lucas would have found it amusing, this standoff born from his death. He'd always been interested in game theory, in the mathematics of conflict. Now his death had become the ultimate game, forcing moves and counter-moves that ripple through shadow organizations and congressional hearings alike. 5 years have passed since that phone call. 5 years of fighting for truth about deaths that didn't happen and lives that weren't lived. I'm older now, tired in ways that sleep doesn't fix, but I'm also clearer, more focused, understanding finally what matters. Not the secrets I helped create in naval intelligence, not the operations that never happened. What matters is that Lucas lived, even if hidden, that he loved, even if silenced, that his death, both of them, exposed systems that thrive on stolen lives and leveraged love. That's his legacy, not Operation Compass or the program that hid him, but the light his death cast on darkness that prefers to operate unseen. I still have the motorcycle, the one I was working on when the hospital called. I finished it using the manual from Lucas's apartment, following his notes and modifications. It runs perfectly now, a machine built by father and son who never got to work on it together. Sometimes I ride it to the places Lucas went during his 3 hidden years. I've met his co-workers from the shop, his neighbors from the apartment, the few friends he'd carefully made. They tell me stories about the quiet young man who seemed older than his years, who worked with intense focus, who sometimes stared into distance like he was seeing another life. They didn't know they were describing a ghost, a son stolen from his father, a life conscripted into service for secrets that predated his birth. One of them, a young woman named Amy who'd worked at the coffee shop Lucas frequented, told me he'd talked about his father sometimes. Said his dad was a hero who didn't know it, a man who'd sacrificed everything for others. She thought Lucas was military, following in his father's footsteps. She wasn't wrong, exactly. We were both soldiers in wars that weren't declared, casualties of operations that never happened, veterans of conflicts that couldn't be acknowledged. The only difference was that I'd volunteered for my service. Lucas had been drafted by birth, conscripted by blood, killed by connection to secrets he'd never chosen to know. The last time I saw Martinez was a year ago, at a congressional hearing about intelligence oversight. He was in the gallery, watching as I testified in closed session about programs that use family as leverage. Our eyes met across the room. He looked older, grayer, carrying weight that wasn't physical. Later, in the hallway, he approached. "You're going to burn it all down," he said quietly. "Everything we built, everything we protected." I looked at him. This man who'd been my brother in arms, who'd stolen my son, who'd probably saved other lives through horrible choices. "It's already burning, Diego. Has been since you decided children were acceptable casualties." He walked away without responding. But a week later, another package arrived. More documents about the program. Names of others who'd been hidden. Information that could save lives or destroy them, depending on how it was used. I think, in his way, Martinez is trying to atone. He can't admit wrongdoing without bringing down entire networks. But he can leak information, guide investigations, ensure that the program's victims are found before they're killed. It's not redemption, but it's something. A crack in the armor of absolute operational security. Lucas would have appreciated the irony, his death forcing conscience on those who'd operated without it. The truth is that Operation Compass was canceled, not because it was wrong, but because it was too visible. Someone talked, media sniffed around, congressional oversight started asking questions. So they shut it down, buried the plans, disappeared the evidence, but the people involved remained, carrying knowledge that could destroy careers, topple administrations, rewrite history. That knowledge became leverage, and leverage required management, and management required programs that didn't exist. Lucas was just collateral damage in that management. A 19-year-old kid who'd found the wrong photo, asked the wrong questions, learned truths that weren't meant for him. His choice was death or disappearance. He chose disappearance to protect me, not knowing that his empty grave would slowly kill the father he was trying to save. 3 years of visiting that empty plot, talking to absence, building guilt on guilt. 3 years of Lucas listening to recordings of my grief, wanting to reveal himself, but knowing that truth would mean death for both of us. 3 years of parallel suffering, separated by lies that were supposed to protect, but only deepened wounds. And then the motorcycle accident that ended the charade. Brake lines cut just sloppily enough to be discovered. A body delivered to a hospital instead of disappeared. Phone calls that reached the right father at the right time. Looking back, I think Lucas engineered his own exposure, found a way to die that would reveal he'd been alive, forced the program into the light through the simple act of dying badly, his final intelligence operation, using his death as a weapon against those who'd weaponized his life. The handler who'd killed him had probably been following orders, but Lucas had made those orders impossible to follow cleanly. He'd created evidence, left trails, ensured that his death would raise questions that couldn't be answered without admitting he'd been alive. It worked. His death exposed not just the program, but the entire architecture of control built on fake deaths and leveraged families. Congressional investigations, media coverage, FBI raids on facilities that didn't officially exist. Small victories, mostly symbolic, but victories nonetheless. And somewhere in shadow offices that don't appear on building directories, powerful people who traffic in secrets understood that their best weapon, love used as leverage, could be turned against them. That parents would burn down national security to find their children. That the dead might refuse to stay buried. That love, when pushed far enough, becomes more dangerous than any operational security. Lucas's story spread through networks of families who'd lost children to programs, operations, secrets. They recognized the patterns, the suspicious deaths, the corrupt officials, the empty graves. Some found their children still alive, hidden in program facilities, living as leverage. Most found only confirmation of death, but even that was better than not knowing. The not knowing is what kills you slowly, the uncertainty that feeds on itself, growing larger with each unanswered question. I'd lived with that uncertainty for 3 years, and it had nearly destroyed me. Now I help others avoid that same slow dissolution, that same gradual surrender to questions without answers. The compass tattoo on my wrist has faded slightly over the years, but the needle still points true. Not north anymore, but toward Lucas's grave, toward truth, toward the son who died twice to protect and expose the father who'd failed him. Sometimes I trace it absently while reading his journal, feeling the raised skin of ink and scar, remembering the day we'd gotten them together. He'd been so excited, talking about navigation and direction and finding your way home. Neither of us knew then that home would become a concept instead of a place, that finding your way would mean navigating between truth and classification, that the compass would outlive the one who wore it. But that's the nature of symbols. They survive their creators, carry meaning beyond intention, point toward destinations we never imagined. Lucas's compass pointed him toward a truth that killed him. Mine points toward a mission born from his death. Together, they form a navigation system for others lost in the shadow world of programs that don't exist, operations that never happened, children who died but didn't die. The hospital's call that morning had shattered one reality and revealed another. Their simple notification of death had exposed 3 years of lies, decades of conspiracy, an architecture of control built on false graves and leveraged love. Dr. Prasad still calls sometimes, tells me about suspicious deaths that cross his table, patterns that don't quite fit. I investigate when I can, usually finding mundane explanations, but sometimes uncovering another thread in the tapestry of hidden programs. Each thread pulled risks, unraveling everything. But that's the nature of truth. It wants to be known, fights against classification, finds ways to surface despite the weight of secrets pressing it down. Lucas understood that. His journal shows a young man systematically documenting his own disappearance, building evidence of the program that controlled him, creating a record that would survive his death. He knew they'd kill him eventually. The program didn't release assets, it only terminated them. So he turned his life into evidence, his death into testimony, his grave into a monument to truth that couldn't be classified. The real funeral, the one where we actually buried Lucas, was small. Just me, the FBI agents who'd become allies, and a few of the families we'd helped find answers. We didn't share the location publicly, didn't want it becoming a site of conspiracy theories or extremist gatherings. But somehow, people find it anyway, leave flowers and compass roses and photos of their own missing children. It's become a quiet shrine to the disappeared, the leveraged, the officially dead who might still be breathing somewhere. I don't mind. Lucas would have wanted his grave to mean something, to serve a purpose beyond containing his body, and it does. It stands as proof that the dead can speak, that empty graves can be filled with truth, that love survives even the most calculated attempts to weaponize it. Martinez is still out there, I know, still managing programs that don't exist, still using families as leverage, still believing that national security justifies any cruelty, but he's more careful now, knowing that every fake death might expose the system, that every leveraged child might become a Lucas Novak, that every empty grave might become a monument to his failures. We're enemies now, but enemies who understand each other, who speak the same language of operations and assets and acceptable losses. The difference is that I no longer find any losses acceptable. Not after Lucas. Not after learning that my son died twice for secrets that protected no one but those who trade in secrets. Some nights, I dream about the phone call, about Dr. Prasad's voice telling me Lucas had died in surgery after being dead for 3 years. In the dreams, I sometimes save him, get to the hospital in time, find him alive, tell him I love him and forgive him and nothing else matters. But I always wake to the same reality. My son is buried in Riverside Cemetery, lot 1247, under a stone that tells the truth about his 2 deaths. The dreams are just grief's way of processing the impossible, of trying to rewrite history, of wishing for different outcomes. But history doesn't rewrite. The dead don't return. Fathers don't get second chances with sons they've failed. All we get is the aftermath, the investigation, the slow accumulation of truth that might prevent the next father from losing his son to programs that don't exist. The motorcycle shop where Lucas worked for 2 years has a small plaque now. The owner put it up after learning the truth about his best mechanic. It just says, Lucas Novak worked here, but those who know the story understand what it means. It marks a place where a dead man lived, where a ghost built engines, where a son hidden from his father found small moments of normal life. I stop by sometimes, talk to the current mechanics, young people who've heard the story and can't quite believe it. They ask questions about Lucas, about the program, about how someone can be dead and alive simultaneously. I tell them what I can, leaving out the classified details that would get them killed, focusing on the human cost of institutional secrecy. One of them, a young man about Lucas's age, asked me once if I blamed myself, if I thought Lucas would still be alive if I'd never been in naval intelligence, if Operation Compass had never been planned, if that photo had never existed. The answer is yes, of course. The causal chain is clear. My past created the circumstances that killed my son, twice. But blame is too simple for something this complex. It assumes single points of failure instead of systems designed to fail. Lucas died because of choices made by dozens of people over decades, each choosing operational security over human security, each prioritizing secrets over souls. My guilt is real, but not unique. It's shared by everyone who's ever stamped classified on documents that hide crimes, who've ever followed orders they knew were wrong, who've ever chosen career over conscience. 5 years after the phone call, I've learned to live with the weight of that shared guilt. It drives the work now, finding the disappeared, exposing the programs, forcing accountability on systems that resist it. Lucas's death wasn't meaningless if it prevents other deaths. His suffering wasn't pointless if it exposes the suffering of others. His grave isn't just a grave if it stands as a warning that love weaponized becomes a weapon against those who wield it. The compass on my wrist still points toward him, toward truth, toward a reckoning that's far from over. And sometimes, in the quiet moments at his grave, I swear I can feel him pointing back, guiding me toward the next empty plot, the next grieving parent, the next truth that needs excavation. The program thought they could control death, use it as leverage, deploy it as a tool of control. They were wrong. Death, like truth, has its own logic, its own momentum, its own insistence on being recognized. Lucas proved that by dying badly, messily, in ways that exposed the clean lies that had hidden him for 3 years. His motorcycle accident was their failure, not his. He'd found a way to make his death speak louder than his silenced life ever could. That's his real legacy. Not the grave or the journal or the exposed conspiracy, but the proof that even the most controlled death can become uncontrollable truth. And that truth, once released, spreads like wildfire through the shadow world, illuminating programs that depend on darkness, exposing operations that require ignorance, burning through classifications that hide crimes behind national security. The hospital's call that morning changed everything. One phone call dismantled 3 years of carefully constructed lies, exposed decades of hidden programs, revealed an architecture of control built on false deaths and leveraged families. Dr. Prasad had no idea what he was setting in motion when he dialed my number. He was just doing his job, following procedure, notifying next of kin. But that simple act of professional duty became the thread that, when pulled, unraveled conspiracies that reached from morgues to the Pentagon. Lucas would have appreciated that, the small human moment that brought down inhuman systems. He'd always believed in the power of individual action, even when that action was constrained by forces beyond control. His death was his final individual action, his last chance to matter, his ultimate refusal to remain, disappeared. I carry his journal with me always now, not the original. That's in the evidence vault, but a copy, worn from reading, annotated with my own observations, expanded with information discovered since his death. It's become a manual for understanding the program, for recognizing patterns, for finding others, like Lucas. When I meet with families who've lost children to suspicious circumstances, I show them entries that match their experiences. The shock of recognition in their faces is always the same: relief that they're not crazy, horror that their suspicions are confirmed, determination to find the truth. Lucas's words, written in hiding, have become a beacon for others hidden in similar shadows. His voice, silenced in life, speaks loudly in death, guiding investigations, confirming suspicions, proving that the impossible is actually standard operating procedure in certain circles. The compass tattoo is my identifier now. When I meet with others who've lost family to the programs, they look for it, recognize it, understand what it means. I'm the father who lost his son twice, who exposed Operation Compass, who turned personal tragedy into systemic revelation. It's not a role I wanted, but it's the role Lucas's death created for me. Every speech I give, every family I help, every program operative I expose, it's all continuation of Lucas's final operation, his death transformed into action, his grave becoming a command post in a war against those who wage war on their own citizens. The living dead, as Lucas and others in the program called themselves, deserve better than shadows. They deserve recognition, even if posthumous. They deserve graves that hold bodies and stories that hold truth. 5 years on, the fight continues. Programs get exposed and renamed. Operatives get caught and replaced. Families get answers and more questions. But something has fundamentally changed. The assumption of absolute secrecy has cracked. The certainty that classification trumps everything has weakened. The belief that families will accept official stories has shattered. Lucas's death, both of them, proved that love is stronger than leverage, that truth survives burial, that fathers will burn down national security to find their sons. And that knowledge has spread through the shadow world like a virus, infecting operations with doubt, programs with conscience, operatives with the understanding that their actions might one day face light. It's not victory. That's too clean a word for something this messy. But it's progress. Slow, painful, bought with blood and empty graves, but progress nonetheless. I'll visit Lucas's grave tomorrow, like every Sunday. I'll tell him about the week's work, the families helped, the small victories against enormous systems. I'll trace the compass on my wrist and remember the day we got them together, back when the future seemed navigable, when finding your way home seemed possible. And I'll leave knowing that Lucas found his way home the only way he could, through death that exposed life, through ending that revealed beginning, through a grave that finally holds truth instead of lies. The compass pointed true after all. It just led through darker territory than either of us imagined, toward a destination neither of us would have chosen, but both of us had to reach. Him through dying twice, me through surviving to tell about it. Father and son, separated by death, but united in mission, both navigating by the same star, the truth that refuses to stay buried, no matter how deep the grave or how classified the soil.